Ben, you ready?
Hey everyone, welcome. Thanks for turning on your cameras. For those of you who have, if you haven't, please do.
I want to know how many actual
For
parents
those
are
of
here.
you who are new to the Demon, I'm Ben Olson. I'm one of the co-founders here. We got several team members. We got Eric and Abigail and co-founder Nathan. How's it going, Nathan?
I'm great. Can you hear me?
You know
I don't
what?
think Ben's
I
got
can.
audio. Hi, everybody. I'm Nathan Fox. I'm one of the co-founders of LSAT Demon. Ben Olson is my tech challenged partner in crime. No, he's actually not tech challenged, but he's working on his audio. You can hear me now, Ben?
Thank you. Yes. I was like, wow, it's quiet here tonight, so I guess I better get talking. But all right, anyways.
Wow, we got lots of parents here. That's amazing. Thanks for coming. Nice to see everybody. Hi. Ben, why don't you lead?
All right, sounds good. What inspired this class, Nathan? Would you say it's all the emails we get from kids who
Yeah, it was requested by some existing students of ours, where they were like, hey, I can't get my folks to listen to the things that I'm telling them you guys say. we get we get lots of emails from listeners to our podcasts. We have two podcasts, by the way, the Thinking LSAT podcast and the LSAT Demon Daily podcast. If you're not already subscribed to those, you might want to check them out, and you'll get some information about law school admissions and LSAT stuff as well. But yeah, the reason why we wanted to do this session was that we had, I don't know, there's like a disconnect sometimes between what our students understand about the law school admissions test and law school admissions more broadly, and what their parents apparently thought about the test and the admissions game.
Yeah. And I will say that I come at this as someone who's, well, both of us we've been in this game for over 15 years each. And I went to law school myself. I went to George Washington in Washington, D.C. Back in 2003, graduated in 2006, and then started teaching the LSAT in 2007. I almost entirely paid for law school. I did get some discounts because my wife was working at the law school, but I didn't understand this game at all. Even for the first several years that I was teaching the LSAT. But over time, talking with Nathan on the podcast and just learning more and more as we go into this process, I've come to realize how normal it is for students to go to law school for free, or at least very close to free, right? And in fact, it's so normal that if you are paying full price for law school, or more than half of the listed price of a law school, it's almost certain that you're overpaying. I could say that more strongly, but there are schools in which 99% of the class is getting some sort of scholarship. So if you're paying full price, you're in the 1% that is not, right? I also come at this, I guess, as a parent. I have a blended family. My wife has 2 kids and I have 4 kids. Mine are 10 years old to 18. My wife's are 15 and 18. And so our 2 oldest kids are going into college right now. That's not law school, but of course the costs of this are top of mind always. And the same sort of, I would say, shenanigans are happening on the college level as I'm learning more about that. But the great thing about the law school situation is that you can go for free, and it's very formulaic. So if there's nothing else that you learn tonight, if you have to get off in 2 minutes, just know this one thing. Go to lsatdemon.com. We can put the link in right now, /scholarships. And you can see what your student's GPA and potential LSAT score will do in terms of getting them full ride scholarships to all the ABA accredited law schools in the country. And you can see that even if you just raise an LSAT score from, say, a 160 to a 165, or from a 165 to a 170, there are schools that won't consider you, that will then start considering you and even offer you at least half tuition scholarships or full tuition scholarships. And that information alone, I think, is the most important message, because it's you can see, oh, this is what I have to do. I just have to improve my LSAT by 5 points, which, by the way, is an extraordinarily small number. Most people who prep with us, they easily make a 10-point increase, but we see people who improve by 20 points or 30 points all the time. Like it's become unsurprising to hear someone say, oh, I went up 27 points. It's like, wow, that's incredible, but also, okay, cool. Next. It's not like, oh my God, let me stop the car, pull over and write this down. It's just yet another student who has done that. So you just look at that chart and figure out, okay, if I can just work a little bit more on my LSAT and improve it by 10 points, I'm going to go from paying $150,000 over the next 3 years to paying potentially nothing except living expenses.
It's all true. I mean, I don't even, when people ask me what I do for a living, I don't even say I'm an LSAT teacher anymore. I say that I save people $100,000 on their law school tuition. I see that as what I do in the world, is that I help people avoid a crippling amount of debt that the schools are all too happy to just usher you right into. We're not making any of this up. It's all based on publicly available data. The American Bar Association has this requirement that law schools publish a certain amount of data annually. And one of the things that they're required to publish is, in addition to the LSAT and GPA breakdown of their class, we get to see the scholarships that are offered to these classes. And this might be the second most important thing we could teach you tonight, is that you really need to look at these American Bar Association 509 reports. I'm going to share my screen just for a quick second here so that you can see how to do it. This is our scholarship estimator. Again, that's lsatdemon.com /scholarships. Down at the bottom, you can play with various GPAs and various LSATs. Then you can see what kinds of offers you're likely to get. Here, if I'm looking at a 3.5 GPA and a 160 LSAT, that's not a student who is going to really impress the top law schools. That said, if you scroll down the estimator a ways, you start to see some more than half scholarships popping up, 25th in the country, Alabama, more than half. And if you're not sure that that's real, you can click on this little PDF icon right here. So we've got them all organized for you. The schools tend to kind of hide these on their website a little bit because, they don't want you to know this information, really. They're required to publish this information. If we click on the little PDF icon, it brings up the actual report. You can see all kinds of data here on LSAT, GPA, various other things. But if you scroll down and keep going and keep going and keep going, then eventually you get to this table right here, grants and scholarships. And here, this is just, I didn't prepare for this class. I'm just picking one kind of at random, but you can see that Alabama, what is this? Yeah, University of Alabama Law School, they are giving 90% of their class some sort of scholarship. And that breaks down further to 42% of the class is getting half to full. And you think that's great, right? Wow, you guys made me a scholarship offer of over half your tuition. Oh, wow, thank you so much for this 60% scholarship. But if you keep going down further, you'll realize that 2% of the class at Alabama are getting a full tuition scholarship, and a whopping 23% of the class at Alabama are getting not only a full tuition, but they're getting more than full tuition. They're getting a stipend, they're getting living expenses, their housing expenses, whatever. But the schools are at that point paying them to attend their school. And more accurately, it's the students who aren't getting grants that are paying these students to attend Alabama, right? 90% of the school is getting some sort of a grant. There's 10% of the school that's getting no grant. Well, if you're in the 10% of the school that's getting no grant, then you're paying not only your tuition to the school, but you're paying the tuition and possibly even the rent of one of these people who are getting a more than full tuition scholarship.
Yeah. What's crazy about this is we go over these schools all the time on the podcast, somewhat at random, because people email in. And like you were saying, Nathan, you didn't prepare for this. You just picked Alabama. Put any school you want and just go over to the 509 and click on it, and you will see surprising numbers constantly. There are some schools that maybe only 50% of the class is getting scholarships. But even then, I mean, you have to think about that for a second. Half of the students are getting a discount. So if you're not getting a discount, it's okay, you're in the bottom half. That's unfortunate. And really unfortunate because you're turning around and you're paying more than what the education is worth, so that the institution can then fund the education for other folks.
From what we've been able to see, I think law school is approximately priced double what it would be if everybody was paying the same. It's essentially, there's somebody there on a full ride for everybody who's there paying full price. And then in the middle, there's a bunch of people who are getting these partial scholarships. The ones at the very bottom end, we call them scammerships. These are really common. Schools, they need bodies. They need your butts in seats, and because they need the tuition dollars. And they will try to attract you by giving you a discount, even if that discount isn't really what you're worth. So we sometimes see, scholarship offers where it's like, well, we're going to give you $7,500 for your first year of law school. Wow, that's great. $7,500. Okay, but the tuition is $50,000 for 3 years. The tuition is $150,000. If you're giving me $7,500 scholarship in the first year, you're giving me nothing. You're giving me whatever. That's not even 10%. I mean, it's just, that's their way of enticing you to get you to come and essentially overpay for their school.
Yeah. I think that, I hope that this is making sense and that you're seeing that, okay, if you were planning to pay for law school, maybe you don't have to. And in fact, you probably shouldn't. And I imagine that some of you might be thinking, well, wait a sec. Okay, I can go to some of these schools for free, but wouldn't it be better to go to a better school? And the answer to that question is almost always no. I mean, there are exceptions. Sometimes people get into Harvard, or they get into Yale, or they get into Stanford, and they just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to pay this money, and I'm going to do that knowingly. But for so many people, if you can get into, say, and it really doesn't matter what school, you can just pick any school, but let's say the University of Chicago, right? Well, maybe you can get in there and they're not going to give you much, if any, of a discount. But that also means because you were able to get in there, you can get into a school that's just a few ranks down. So we're not talking about any difference in quality of education or quality of reputation. You're just going a few schools down, and now you're going for free. And because you're going for free, you're almost certainly going to be in the top of the class as opposed to the middle or the bottom of the class of the other school that you just eked into, right? And so it's just a win all around. You don't have this massive amount of debt that you're incurring to go to school. And you're now in the top of your class, which is very, very important for getting summer jobs, which then lead to your first jobs right out of law school. So the numbers game, for better or worse, continues. But by saving all that money, you're ironically also at the same time setting yourself up to be the most attractive candidate at that school, which is often way more important than being a middle candidate at a higher school. Now, of course, there are exceptions. Like I'm sure students at the bottom of the class at Harvard are still getting job interviews, but that's a very, very small segment of the applicant pool. For the vast, vast majority of people, you can just go down a few schools in ranking, and all of a sudden you're going from full price to full tuition, paying full price, and then getting a full tuition scholarship and all the benefits that come with it.
I hope you guys are playing with that scholarship estimator already. Again, lsatdemon.com/scholarships. I have a hypothesis that one LSAT point is worth about $10,000. And I think that that's a conservative hypothesis. The way I came up with that number was I realized that there are students who are going to get denied by a school with a 155 who are then going to get a full ride to that exact same school, same candidate, same grades, same extracurriculars, same letters of recommendation, same personal statement, nothing different about this candidate, except they improve their LSAT from a 155 to a 165. Next thing you know, that same school is offering a student that they literally denied. Now in the next cycle, they're getting a full ride scholarship. That's a 10-point LSAT improvement. It's worth at least $100,000. So that's where I came up with my 1 point equals $10,000. And I think it's been proven pretty much true. Wouldn't you say, Ben? It's probably conservative.
Well, yeah. And it's conservative in the sense that you don't often need to go up 10 points to see that change. Because if you look at the 509 reports, you'll see that the spread between the 25th percentile LSAT score at that school and the 75th percentile score at that school is often only 4 or 5 points, something like that, right? I don't even remember exactly, but
I just looked again at Alabama, and it's actually 9 points at that school.
Oh, okay.
You're right. It's fewer than 10 points at almost every school. And, 25th percentile means that, 75% of their class has a higher LSAT than that. They just don't tend to admit very many of those people. But at the 75th percentile, now it's like, wow, 75% of the school has a lower LSAT than that candidate. And that's why they have to roll out the red carpet. I guess it's actually the green carpet because it's made of money for, in order to attract that student. They have to really show that student the money because that student otherwise is going to take some better offer from some other school. I want to take your questions, but I also want to preempt one particular question. Something that we get a lot of is kind of an argument from extremes where people will say, but Nathan, if I get in, let's say I get a full ride to Northeastern, that's in Boston, by the way. If I get a full ride to Northeastern, but I also get into Harvard, that's also in Boston area. If I get a full ride to Northeastern and I get into Harvard, I mean, you really telling me to turn down Harvard in order to go to Northeastern? And The problem with that line of reasoning is that that would never be anybody's actual decision unless you only had applied to Northeastern and Harvard. Northeastern and Harvard are separated by like 100 points in the rankings, or 100 schools in the rankings. Harvard is literally the best, or close to, top 3 always, while Northeastern is more like 100th in the country, or maybe less. And I would never tell anybody to turn down Harvard in order to go to Northeastern. But even in Boston itself, like without leaving the confines of Boston, you do have Boston University and Boston College. Those schools are much closer to Harvard in the rankings than they are to Northeastern. And if you're getting into Harvard, you're almost guaranteed to get a scholarship to BU or BC. That's going to be the same no matter where you are in the country, as long as you're willing to apply to like 10 or 15 schools, which is what we're going to eventually advise. Even more is good in some situations, but I would say 10 at the bare minimum. You're going to end up getting back a spectrum of offers. And, some schools that you thought you were a shoo-in for a scholarship won't give you one. Other schools that you thought you couldn't even get into will let you in. And there is some randomness in the process, but you can take the randomness out of it in large part if you just make sure that you apply broadly so that you can get yourself multiple chances for bids from these schools.
I do think this might be a good opportunity to talk about GLAD. It's at the end of the agenda, but I do want everyone to understand the process that we're talking about, the exact steps you need to take to really leverage this information. Right now, as I'm going through the college application process with my son, I'm learning that GPA is very significant to these schools. SAT doesn't matter so much, but it's the exact opposite in the law school game. The law schools heavily weigh the LSAT, and it's not totally irrational. Part of it is, of course, to put themselves up in the rankings, because U.S. News and World Report rankings gives a lot of weight to the average LSAT score of these institutions, or the median LSAT score. But and it's also been shown that people who do well in the LSAT tend to do well in law school, and people who tend to do well in law school tend to be more likely to get jobs when they graduate. So the schools aren't looking at this number just randomly. There is a lot of value in it. But that said, what's important for us today is to recognize that the schools give a lot of weight to it. So even though GPA is important, and we will talk about the importance of that, for a lot of schools, they are giving the LSAT 5 times as much weight as the GPA, right? So for people who went to undergrad a long time ago, or even if you just finished, your grades are set in stone, and it might feel like a lost cause, but it's like, no, actually it's not, because what you do with your LSAT score is going to dramatically affect your admissions chances. And in fact, this is something that we say on the podcast all the time, but the estimator is very good at estimating what scholarships you're likely to get. And notice, it does not ask you very much information. It asks you your GPA, your LSAT score, and whether you are an underrepresented minority. Those are 3 data points that are sufficient to very accurately or very closely estimate how likely you are to get a scholarship. That shows how important those numbers are in the process, right? So anyways, the long and short of all this is that the LSAT is very important. It's more important than grades. But what we always tell people is GLAD. This is your application process. It's GLAD. And that is, first, focus on your GPA. So GLAD, GPA, right? GLAD. The second thing is focus on your LSAT score. The third thing is to apply broadly and to apply early. And then the fourth thing, and this is the thing that everyone gets out of order, it's last. But the fourth thing you do is you decide if you're going to go and where you're going to go after you've done all those other things, right? So many people decide, they're like, oh, I'm going to go to BU. It's like, okay, well, now you've just locked yourself into this path and given BU all the power. Instead, what you want to do is you want to apply, you want to do everything right, get the best GPA you can get the best LSAT score you can get, apply broadly, apply early. So now every school is trying to get you, and then you get offers, and then you decide if they're good enough, because maybe none of them are good enough, and it's better to not go to school. Or if any of them are good enough, then you decide which one you want to do based on the offers you get. You can't make this decision until you know the final cost, right? It'd be like choosing a car without knowing the price. It's like, well, you know what? I'm committing to a Tesla. It's like, okay, well, we'll tell you what the price is when we're done with this conversation. It's like, no, you need to know that in order to decide whether that's a valuable decision or a valuable purchase.
Yeah, before you even decide, you ask the school if that's their final offer. I mean, people don't realize this, but students tend to think that it's such a blessing when they get their offer of admission. Well, an offer of admission is merely an offer to purchase a wildly expensive piece of paper. I mean, what do you get in the end? You ultimately get a pleather pad folio with a piece of paper on the inside of it. And yeah, you're getting the education along the way, and you're getting the network. You're getting certified to sit for the bar exam in your state. But you don't, we want to be like, we want to put you in the driver's seat of this negotiation. These people do, hundreds of these negotiations every year. And frequently they'll say stuff like, we don't negotiate scholarship offers, which is merely their first step in the scholarship negotiation. You can always ask. And if they say no, they can say no, but sometimes they say yes. Early on in my LSAT career, I saw a student in San Francisco who was admitted to Columbia and admitted to UC Berkeley. Columbia offered her a scholarship. Berkeley did not. This student had a fiance in medical residency in San Francisco. She was a Bay Area native. She wanted to live in the Bay Area. She didn't tell Berkeley that. Instead, she showed Berkeley her scholarship offer from Columbia, and Berkeley went from $0 to $135,000. I'll never forget it, because it was 0 to 135,000 simply because she asked. The way they had left the negotiations, Berkeley just said, hey, here's your offer of admission. We'd love to have you. Columbia said, here's your offer of admission and here's your scholarship offer. She could have just chosen Berkeley because that really was her number one choice. But instead, she played the game and she sent them an email politely saying, hey, I have this other scholarship offer. Is there any way that you could, consider that? And not only did they consider it, but they gave her $135,000 because of an email. So that's the game we're playing here. And that's what I'm passionate about. I think that's what Ben's passionate about as well, is that we just want to send you, if you're a student, and your child, if you're a parent, we want to help your family navigate this admission process without accumulating a mountain of debt.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about what am I passionate about, I'm passionate about the fact that this is a method that works and makes an astronomical difference in the amount of money you're going to end up paying, right? I don't know what you all have heard from other sources, but we interviewed someone on the show about managing debt. And he had, all the best intentions in the world of helping people mitigate the debt that they had. But the tips were things along the lines of, don't go out to eat that much. Try to save money here and there. It's rearranging chairs on the Titanic, right?
I think, Ben, I think that they literally had a PowerPoint presentation where one of the bullet points was like, recycle cans.
Yeah. I mean, it's embarrassing. That's not the solution to crushing debt load, right? And it's worse because that's someone trying to help, right? And the solution is non-effective. It's not effective. But then you also have a whole industry of people who have relabeled student debt as, oh, it's good debt, or this is.
Oh yeah, that's the other one. It was at a law school admission council forum, and again a PowerPoint presentation. Crush the LSAT, not cans. I like that, Eric. Good one. Yeah, so it was at an LSAC forum, and they had a slide up that was it used a stoplight as a helpful metaphor for what kinds of debt are bad and good, and it was like credit card debt, red light. Don't accumulate credit card debt. That's bad, red light. Auto loan, yellow light. Well, you need a car, but maybe you don't need that fancy of a car. So auto loan, really think about it. And sure enough, they get to student debt, green light, and just like breeze on to the next step. To try to give people this really misleading, really dangerous idea that you can get yourself into trouble with your credit card, but you can't get yourself into trouble with your student loans. The problem with that is that credit cards have a limit and student loans don't.
I mean, it just gets worse the more you talk about student debt, and especially the fact that it's not secured, it's not collateralized by anything. So if for whatever reason you get sick or can't pay it back, there's nothing to return, right? Like at least your car, you can say, okay, I can't make my payments, take my car back. But you can't do that with student debt. And there's all sorts of restrictions on it. I mean, student debt can't be forgiven in bankruptcy, from what I understand. It's crazy. It's just something that we don't want anyone to touch. And if you do have to take out student debt, it should be extraordinarily minimal and done very cautiously. And this is the way to just blast through tons of student debt and just say, hey, I don't even need it because I'm either going for free or I'm going to law school very, very close to free.
Schools love to talk about the average salary for lawyers. Schools love to talk about how the average salaries for graduates from their school is $100,000. It's true that the average starting salary for lawyers is $100,000. It is untrue that very many lawyers actually make $100,000, though. We're looking at a bimodal distribution of starting salaries for lawyers. Bimodal means that it's not just a bell curve like you're used to seeing. Instead, it goes up twice. And so there's a spike around these days. Ben, what is it? 180, 190, $200,000 a year?
It's actually, yeah, 200. It's set by, starts, I think, in the New York firms, but yeah, it's around 200,000 these days. That's bringing up the average.
If you go into big law, you might make $200,000 a year. But the vast majority of lawyers don't practice in big law. And so lawyers who are going to work in a small firm, a medium firm, anywhere in the public interest, if you're going to be a public defender, if you're going to be a district attorney, any of those starting jobs are probably going to pay you more like $60,000, $65,000, maybe $70,000 these days. And so, yeah, the average salary for lawyers is in the six figures, but the but the vast majority of people who go to law school don't ever end up sniffing anything close to that $200,000 starting salary.
And so the average is totally misleading and useless. And, Nathan, even as you talk about these numbers, everyone has to remember that you're endeavoring on a 3-year journey that you may end up absolutely hating. I hope you love it. I hope it's what you want to do with your life, but you go there for a year and you're like, this sucks. Well, now if you've taken out debt, you've got to finish that program so you can continue on this path, because this plan depends on you making money when you get out, even if that's just $70,000. But if you go for free or almost free and things don't work out the way you expected, you can walk away with just the time you lost there, lesson learned, and whatever minimal living expenses you had, right?
Yeah.
It's the ultimate freedom. But if it works out, you are setting yourself up for just, financial stability right off the bat, and flexibility. So many people are like, oh, well, I want to do this, but I got to go. You hear it. They go, I'm going to do big law for 3 years, pay off my loans, and then go do what I want. But what happens is they get into big law, your income goes up, your lifestyle goes up to try to keep up with that. And then you can't leave without giving up all that, income, and then you're stuck. So anyways, I think we should take questions, huh, Nathan?
Well, let's, yes. So please queue up, just use the raise hand feature in Zoom if you want us to talk to you. We'll definitely call on you. But Ben, you brought up GLAD. I want to talk about GLAD one more time to make sure that everybody's doing these items in the right order.
Yep.
GPA first, kids. So I see some parents with their child with them. Is the child getting straight A's right now? Because if you're not, you have no business studying for the LSAT. We do not want you taking our classes if you are getting even a single A- right now. Now, I'm not talking about water under the bridge, old grades, bad grades. I had terrible grades myself as an undergrad, and that's fine. Then you got to move on to the LSAT component, and you got to kill that. No matter whether your grades are good or bad, you got to kill the LSAT. But step one, if you're an undergrad, if you are still getting undergraduate grades, those grades need to be the very best grades your school offers. So A's, if that's the best you can get, A pluses, if your school gives A pluses. It is really important that you maximize your grades first, and you can come back to us and study for the LSAT down the road. Second item on the agenda is to take the official LSAT or prep for the LSAT. When your practice tests in preparation for the LSAT start to indicate a number that you think is going to get you a scholarship at the school you want, that's when you start taking the official LSAT. Don't schedule official LSATs right now. You don't need to be signed up for the official LSAT if you're still in the beginning stages of your prep. Don't decide in advance when you're going to apply. Don't start looking at schools. Don't do any of that stuff. Sort out your grades, then start studying for the LSAT. When the LSAT practice test scores start looking good, then you can start taking the official LSAT. You're allowed to take the official LSAT up to 5 times in 5 years. You can actually take it 5 times in 1 calendar year if you do the schedule just right, but that shouldn't be anybody's goal. Your goal should be, my practice tests indicate I'm ready, I'm going to take an official test, and then you should just take as many official tests as necessary. Sometimes it's just 1, but more often it's 2 or 3, and sometimes it's 5. We have teachers who work for us who knocked it out of the park on their 5th attempt and ended up with a scholarship to law school. So plan to take it as many times officially as necessary until you get an official score that really shows what you're worth. Law schools only care about the highest score, so you can take it as many times as you can, and they're just going to look at the high number. That's your LSAT component. Then apply. I see some comments in the chat where you're talking about application timelines. you got to consider why law schools give scholarships. Law schools give scholarships so that they can attempt to poach the most qualified applicants, keep them away from other schools. You know, they're out there hunting and they want to try to get you locked in early. Law schools use rolling admissions, which means that they open up the admissions window roughly September 1st. And some schools like Yale, okay, Yale's an exception in a lot of ways, but those schools might not actually start evaluating applications for months. Other schools, though, will start evaluating applications immediately, especially when they see somebody who looks really promising. And this year we saw scholarship offers. I believe it was early September. Does that sound right, Ben, this year?
We did. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That's not every school. It's not every student, but some schools were offering scholarships to some students in September, certainly in October and November and December. When we hear people talking about application deadlines and applying in February, January, February, March, it's just, you got to think about what's going on. These schools have already bid out all these scholarship dollars to attractive candidates who applied early. They're going to have to wait now to hear back from those students. Those students are going to have to make their final decision and pay a deposit and all that. The schools are going to have their hands tied at that point. It's much harder for them to make generous scholarship offers late in the cycle than it is early in the cycle. So if you're going to apply, we want you to apply at the beginning of the cycle. Some schools were opening up in August this year. All schools are opening up at least in September. We would like you as an applicant to have all your ducks in a row. That means you've got your best LSAT officially already on record, then apply at the beginning of the cycle. So if you get your best LSAT in January, that's okay. Just wait until September and then apply for the next cycle so that you can give yourself the very best chance at the best scholarship.
Yeah, I mean, that's where people run into a lot of traps, right? Because all these schools say, hey, application deadlines are March or April, or the later they are, usually the worse the school is. But, you know, people get a great LSAT score in January and they're like, is it too late to apply? And maybe they recognize that it is, but they still get this advice that, oh, well, why don't you just apply and see where you can get in? And it's just the worst thing they can do, because it's just going to tempt them away from offers that will be exponentially better in just 6 months. Right? Life-changingly different.
Yeah. Do not apply late in the cycle just to see what kinds of offers you would get. The worst thing that could happen to you is you get some mediocre offer and you decide that that's what you're worth. It's irrational, but it's how people think. I've seen it happen a million times where people are like, well, I got denied by all these schools and I just only have this one offer. And so I'm going to accept that one offer. And I'm like, wait, but you applied late. You didn't apply to enough schools. You didn't apply with your best LSAT already in hand. Of course you got denied and waitlisted at a bunch of schools. Of course you didn't get a really great offer, because you didn't put yourself in a position to get great offers. And then it's the worst thing you could possibly do to accept one of those offers.
Yeah, even if it's like more than full, you could have gotten into such better schools and gone for free entirely. You just don't know. You got to get the best score you can get, apply early, apply broadly, and then wait to see what comes in and then decide.
Parents, I know you want the best for your child. So do we. Stop forcing your kids, though, into any particular application cycle. One of the things that we hear most from our students who have a lot of angst is, my mom and dad are going to kill me if I don't go to law school this fall. So that's why I'm signed up to take the April LSAT, and then I'm going to apply right away to these two schools that have an application deadline way out in May. But see, if I do that, then it's going to make my parents happy. And that's real bad, parents. You're forcing your kids into a terrible financial decision. My response to that is always, well, are mom and dad paying for your law school tuition? And it's almost always no, we're going to borrow. Oh, they're going to help me with part of it. Well, there's a way that you can help yourself with all of it. And that's by applying early with the best LSAT you can possibly achieve, and apply to multiple schools and then make them bid on you. They're all going to try to pretend as if, oh boy, these seats are so scarce. And, it's such an honor for you to get one of these seats. But the truth is that every year, every law school admits vastly more applicants than are actually going to matriculate at their school. I think there's only one school where more people say yes to them than say no to them, and that's Yale. I think at Yale, it's like slightly more than half of the people who are admitted to Yale actually go to Yale. But at all other law schools, including the most prestigious law school in your local area, UCLA or whatever, they have to admit, probably 3 for every one that ends up going to their school. So do not fall into the trap of applying narrowly. If you apply narrowly, then you're at the whims of that school. If you apply broadly, then it's like, well, hey, it's you and all these other people who are fighting for my attention. That's the way you're going to do it if you want to do it our way. Questions would be great. We have a couple more items on the agenda that we haven't talked about. We haven't talked about the LSAT at all, what the LSAT tests or how the demon approaches the LSAT. But we will.
Yeah.
Any hands up? No? I see Jamie in the chat.
Yeah,
How often do
it.
schools offer stipends with scholarships? They offer stipends sometimes. It varies year to year. I don't think that a stipend is necessarily what you should be going for. And in fact, on the admissions estimator, our lsatdemon.com/scholarships, on that scholarship estimator, we don't ever promise people more than full, because we don't really know how available stipends are. But we do know it's pretty clear that schools are out there offering full rides. So I wouldn't be holding out for a stipend if I were you, unless you know that school offers stipends. We've had students turn down Harvard before and go to University of Michigan Law instead, because Michigan offered them a full tuition scholarship and $10,000 a year. That's kind of rare, but it happens even at top 14 law schools like Michigan, because Michigan has to do that. If they don't do that, then no one's ever going to go to Michigan instead of going to Harvard. But if they make this really generous offer, then they can convince somebody to go to Ann Arbor instead of going to Cambridge.
Yeah. Michael, you ask in one of your podcasts, you speak about being leery of loan repayment programs that schools offer for working in the public sector. Would you be able to expand on that a bit? Yeah, I don't know which episode it was where we actually read one of the conditions, or the paragraph. It was a paragraph that contained the conditions for getting your loans repaid. And it was basically, you need to qualify in a bunch of different ways, right? It's go through this hoop and this other hoop and this other hoop and this other hoop. It wasn't do this or this or this. It was do all of these things, and then you might get some of your loans repaid. The biggest risk you have with these programs is, one, you don't even know if you're going to like and finish law school. You don't know if you're going to like and do the kinds of jobs that are required to get these repayments. And even if you do all of that, it's very possible that you earn yourself out of these repayment programs by earning just a little too much, not
Your spouse
doing
makes
things at
too
the right
much.
time. Yeah. In short, just don't even listen to them. Imagine this. If someone offers you this and says, hey, look, don't worry about loans. You're going to get all this stuff paid back once you start doing public sector work. Just imagine asking that individual to step forward and repay your loans if it doesn't work out.
Yeah. You don't
Would
get your money
anyone do
back.
that?
You don't get your money back if you hate law school and drop out. You don't get your money back if you graduate from law school and decide you don't want to practice law. You don't get your money back if you do want to practice law but can't pass the bar. You don't get your money back if you pass the bar but can't find a job. You don't get your money back if you work in a firm for a year, which happens frequently, and then burn out and decide that you need to quit. The schools are just going to blithely kind of gloss over that and just, oh, law school is a transformative experience, and lawyers, the average salary for lawyers is, geez, $110,000. Big firms are paying $200,000 these days, and if you say something about public interest, oh, well, we have there's very generous
A robust public interest.
robust support programs for people. But the reality is you have to go in income-based repayment where you're not even paying back the interest on your loans. So you're making payments. And this is how it works with this federal loan service repayment program. You have to make payments for 10 years, then get your loan discharged. In those 10 years, the balance on your loan is probably actually going up. Even though you're making 120 qualifying monthly payments, probably the balance on your loan is going up because income-based repayment puts you in a position, you're not making any money. So they're like, well, you can't afford to pay the actual service on your loan. So instead, we're going to have you pay this income adjusted service on your loan, which isn't even paying the interest. So your debt goes up and up and up and up and up for 10 years. Then hopefully, if the federal program still exists, which who knows what federal programs will still exist 10 years from now, if the program still exists, then you can get the loan forgiven. Well, at the same time, you could have just done it our way and gotten a scholarship to law school and had it all paid for up front. I am going to have to run at the top of the hour. I teach a class every Thursday from 5 to 7 Pacific. So I am going to have to go in a sec, but Ben and Eric are going to hang out with you. Ben, did you want to talk about the LSAT stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say that basically the LSAT, and I'm stealing this a lot from you, Nathan, but the LSAT tests your understanding of the English language. It tests your ability to work hard and to, well, I would say those are the two main things. What would you add to that?
I always say logic as well. So I think that the LSAT, it certainly is testing English. I don't know of a more intense test of the English language. So that's not to say that you can't do well on it if English is not your first language. We have seen people just kill it sometimes who had English as a second language. But it really does demand a high level of English reading and writing. So English, logic, and by logic, I don't mean fancy logic. I mean just putting basics together, like just really making baby steps, just combining simple things together. Reading, logic, and then the final thing that the LSAT tests is how hard you can work. Lawyers work extremely hard. Law students work extremely hard. The LSAT is susceptible to you can improve a lot by working really hard. They don't hide the ball on the LSAT. We have 100 practice tests that we can administer to our students. And each of those tests has 100 questions. So we have 10,000 questions that we can play with. That's 400 logic games, 400 reading comprehension passages, 5,000 or whatever it is, logical reasoning questions that we have. And you don't need to do all of those in order to make substantial improvement on your practice scores. Now, we do know some people who have done every practice test. We have teachers who work for us who have done every practice test multiple times before they finally got the best score they could achieve. So hard work is immensely rewarded on this test. You might have heard that people don't really improve very much when they take the test again. That's probably true, but it's only because people don't do anything different between their first attempt and their second attempt. We see people improve their official scores on record all the time by 10 points, 15 points, 20 points. It starts to get a bit more rare when we get to 25 and 30 points. But just this year, we had multiple 30-point improvements. So it's a test that, yeah, you might kill it naturally if you have really good English, really strong logic. But even if you don't kill it right off the bat with English and logic, you can certainly put your nose to the grindstone and work your way to a higher score.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess this segues a little bit into the next point here on the syllabus. How does the demon approach the LSAT? And I would say this is the main difference between us and everything else we've encountered out there. We want people to understand what is actually being said on the test and what the test is actually asking of them. Because if they understand what they're reading and they understand what's being asked, the answers become very clear and obvious over time. And they start to see how the test is actually easy. Most test prep companies like these quick sound bites, you could even call them. I mean, maybe that's too derogatory, but it's just like a quick fix. Hey, look for this word.
Gimmicks. Yeah. I recently taught a class on gimmicks. I bet Abigail can dig up a link to that if you want to have further study. We are really not about gimmicks here. The reason why we're able to achieve 15, 20, 25 point improvements is because we teach students that the LSAT is easy. What we mean by the LSAT is easy is it means what it says. It says what it means. The words on the page justify the correct answer. This test is basically made by lawyers. The correct answer is like legally defensible. The wrong answers are legally defensibly wrong. We can teach students to read more carefully. That frequently in undergrad, they learn that they're supposed to read a 1,000-page book in a week, and they have to stop reading that way. Instead, they need to read very carefully, one sentence at a time. And the test unlocks itself. You teach yourself to unlock these questions, and then you get to find out how easy the LSAT actually is. But it's not from stupid gimmicks like skipping questions, right? Half the reason why Kaplan teaches people to read the question stem first is so that you can skip the questions that you're not good at. Well, we don't accept that at LSAT Demon. You don't get to not be good at some of the questions. Instead, you just have to learn that they're all totally solvable if you just take the time and solve them.
Yeah. Well, and the power of this approach is that if you truly understand what is being said on the page for a particular question, you understand what that question is asking, and you come to a point where you can intuitively understand why the correct answer is correct. Understanding that one question unlocks hundreds of other questions down the road, because now you're a master of that particular ability rather than something one-off that may or may not work in the future. And the huge upside to all of this is that people who do get good at the LSAT do better in law school. So when you really come to understand it, you're really preparing yourself for everything that's going to come down the road, not just in law school, but in your career. And lawyers, they're paid to be professional writers and readers. What was said? Counsel, did you get it? Did you not get it? Because if you didn't get it, you're going to get schooled by the judge or by some other counsel who says, no, that's not what that case says. And everybody's going to nod their head and you're going to feel like a fool. So you need to understand how to read. And the LSAT is the first step in that journey.
I got to leave you there, guys. I'm going to go teach my class. Ben and Eric got you. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you next time. Bye.
It does seem like we've touched on everything on the syllabus. It's been an hour. Totally understandable if you need to take off. But what questions do you have? What do you still want clarification on? Happy to help. It's okay. Just raise your hand or unmute yourself and say what you're thinking.
Hi, Ben. This is Michael. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Go for it.
I was just wondering, is there like a certain score? Because I had a friend of mine actually, he got a certain score on the actual LSAT, and then some schools actually waived his application fee. Is there a certain score that you know of, or is it just kind of school by school basis? Or
oh yeah, it's definitely school by school, because some scores are going to be, you know, a lot better for some schools and not so interesting to some other schools. But you do raise a good point. So I think I don't know if it was you, Michael, who asked earlier in the chat about the cost of applying, but whenever you apply, you have to pay a $45 fee, I think, within LSAC's program for each school that you apply to. So that can add up. And then the schools tack on their own fee, which can be anywhere from $50 to $100 or something like that. Eric, you would know better than I do since I haven't done this for a while. But the main thing I want you all to know is that if you're applying to some school, you should just ask if they're willing to waive their fee. Most schools will email right back and say, yep, and they'll give you that waived. And then, you know, you can apply to more schools without incurring more costs other than the LSAC fee. And of course, some schools will just they'll waive that fee for you. But I would be leery of schools that are reaching out to you and offering you those discounts. You really should be looking at the estimator and preemptively deciding, okay, which schools are likely to let me go for free or very close to free. Of course, you can throw in some reach schools, but by reach, I mean more than half, not, you know, less than half. Because if you apply to a bunch of those schools, you're going to get offers back, some of which are going to be full tuition scholarships. Yeah, no problem. Travis asks, besides the LSAT and UGPA being the main gatekeepers, how valuable or not valuable is work experience in the eyes of law school admissions committees like public accounting? So I think work experience is a great thing in the sense that most kids who work a little bit before they go into law school are much more likely to do better in law school and then later in the, you know, applying for a job process. But they bring a certain level of maturity and experience to the game that's good. But the problem about all these things, work experience, extracurriculars, whatever you decide to write about in your personal statement, all these things, you can't let pursuing them get in the way of LSAT and UGPA. It's not that they don't help. It's just that their contribution is so small that if you get distracted by them and let them compromise either your LSAT or your undergraduate GPA, you're going to end up hurting yourself more than helping yourself. So that's why we don't talk about them too much, even though on the margins, they might help a little. Okay, so another question here. If I use my GI Bill and apply to a yellow ribbon school, will that impact the school's willingness to accept me? That will make them more willing to accept you because they will know that you are coming and willing to pay, right, with your GI money. I'm assuming that's what you mean by that. Okay, other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself.
I'll throw in a question from chat here.
Okay.
My daughter took a course by another company to not be named last summer and never improved. Where should she start with demon lessons?
Oh, that's a great question. The thing about, so I hope this is interesting, but I want to briefly talk about why we started the Demon. I taught in-person classes in Washington, D.C. for 10 years, I guess. I can't keep track of time now, but it was a long time. And the problem I faced in class was I would give out homework to a group of 30, 40, 60 people, and it would be a packet of practice questions, right? And if you're in the top of my class, the hardest questions in that packet were useful to you and the easiest ones were not. And if you were in the bottom of the class, the easiest questions were useful to you, but the hardest ones were a waste of time. So giving students a set of questions that was most useful to them was challenging without just printing reams and reams of paper of questions, right? Like that was also not effective because then you'd have to lug this thing around. So the idea behind the Demon was, let's take all 10,000 questions. At the time, it was 9,000, all 9,000 official LSAT questions, put them into a computer and decide based on difficulty level, which question is best for the person who's studying right now, right? So you do a question, it figures out how good or bad you are at those types of questions, and it starts giving you questions that are right above your skill level. So the reason I'm saying all this is in your question, you said, where should she start with Demon lessons? You don't need to start with the lessons. What you want to do is you want to go and you want to start drilling just one question at a time, because it will start learning how good or bad you are at that type of question, and then give you questions that are right above your skill level. So it's constantly challenging you, but not so much that it's pointless, but enough to continue pulling you up. I mean, that's another big reason I think we've seen such a change in improvement. When I was teaching in-person classes, I would say most people improve between 10 and 15 points. People occasionally improve by 20 points and it would be like, wow, that's awesome. But I think the technology has also just made this process exponentially more efficient, because you're always just pushing yourself a little bit further. It's like going just a little bit further on the treadmill. And that's what causes you to grow and go to the next level. I hope that helps. Maybe that was way too long of an answer, but create a Demon-free account and just hit the drill button. That's all you have to do. Demon-free drill, and it will figure it out for you. Cool. Other questions? It looks like I need to stay up on the chat. Let's see here. Devin, you said you were at another company and hardly improved. I have a live subscription now, and I find watching classes, live watching recordings help me to unlearn the bad habits that I picked up at the other company. However, drills and lessons can help, and a live subscription isn't necessary for that. Yeah, okay, cool. Glad you're unlearning those things. It's unfortunate. But hey, you have what you have and you just start where you are. Okay. Oh, sorry. You guess you're asking if she needs to start with live. No, you don't. You could start with free and drill. There's 3 tests in there, which means there's 300 questions, and then move on to basic. I think that a lot of people do benefit immensely by going to live first, even if they don't want to stay with live, just because by going to a live class, it's like, oh, this is what I got to do. This is the most effective way to study. And then they learn the study process. And then if they want to save money, they downgrade to premium or basic. Totally fine. We just want you to make the best use of your time. Cool. Other questions? I don't know if you see anything else in there, Eric, we should talk about, but
I'm just catching up on it myself and answering a couple questions in chat.
okay. All right. Well, I
I
guess
will
we just-
plug. I
Yeah.
will plug, rather than finish my written response to Michael. Do you have any daily newsletter / LSAT question subscription that can get sent to someone via email? I will plug our podcasts, the LSAT Demon Daily and Thinking LSAT podcasts, which come out daily and weekly, respectively. If you want more info, thinkinglsat.com is probably the best place, kind of central repository for both of those podcasts and our collected LSAT wisdom. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. ThinkingLSAT.com. Thanks, Eric. Okay. Well, now's your chance. Just unmute and say whatever's on your mind. Otherwise, we'll call it a night and get back to life, I guess.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it, Todd. Thank
Okay,
you.
cool. So earlier, Nathan shared a story about a student that got a scholarship offer to Columbia, but she used that to kind of parlay some scholarship money from her first choice school. Could you talk about how that process takes place? Like, to whom did she send the email? Did she have to like prove that the offer from Columbia was legitimate? And can you do the same thing with application fee waivers, or is that not necessary? You just have to ask. You don't have to like use application fee waiver offers from other schools.
Yeah, you don't need to. The application fee waiver part of the process is such a de minimis. It's such a small part, right? That you just ask and they just say yes. And it's not something you want to get too tangled up in, because when you look at the, the size of the numbers that are at play here, if that's the holdup to apply to a school, you just got to let go of that, pay the money and apply, because the potential benefit that could come from a good offer, even if you don't go to that school, is just astronomical compared to that cost. So yes, for those, just ask. For the negotiation process, it's pretty simple in the sense that you're just emailing the admissions office. And so they're, someone's emailing you an offer, they're communicating with you somehow through their website or through LSAC, and you're responding, right? You're saying, hey, I would love to go to your school, but I'm debating this other offer. And if they ask for proof, you can provide it. Sometimes you don't even have to do that, though, because the most powerful thing in the negotiation is the fact that you know what you're worth and what you're willing to do, right? When you get these other offers and you can just say no to school A and go to school B for free or whatever, that's what empowers you. And that's what frames the conversation. And these emails almost get written by themselves, right? It's like now you're in the position of power and you can just speak honestly and kindly. You just say, hey, look, I would love to go to your school. I'd love to be in the Bay Area. I'd love to be wherever this is, but I'm considering this offer and this offer. And is there anything you can do to help me out? And the answer is yes or no. I mean, these things aren't hard necessarily negotiations. They're just factual. They come down to the raw numbers, and that's where the real power comes. I mean, Nathan said in that example, he said the only thing she did was ask. She just emailed and asked, and that is true, and you have to ask. But what she also did was get those other offers, right? That's what really empowered her to make that progress, I think. So anyways, how many schools do you recommend applying to as a minimum? I would say at least 10. But if you're willing to apply to more, I would encourage you to do so. People all the time say, well, I would never go to a school in wherever. I'd never go to that school. And it's crazy because one, even if you don't intend on going there, if they're going to give you a full ride, you could use that as negotiation fodder, right? But a lot of times too, you end up getting the full ride and you say, well, wait, what was my reason for not wanting to go there? I didn't like the cold weather. Well, yeah, but someone's offering you $150,000 to endure that cold weather. What do you think now? It's like, well, okay, it's not that bad. Like some of these things just change and you don't really know until you're done looking at all the offers. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, everyone. It's dark here in Virginia. I'm in Northern Virginia, just outside of DC. And I imagine my kids are at home, probably playing something on their screens. So I will go home and say, hey guys, let's do something constructive and then go to bed. So hope you all have a good night. Thank you so much for coming. If you have any feedback, I think you can just provide it there on the syllabus and let us know what we can do better next time. Let us know if you like this class and want something else like it. We'll try to provide it. So have a good one. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.